Every Torontonian knows the Junction is where the cool kids hang out. It's hard to imagine a Toronto neighborhood more rugged and authentic than the Junction. Bordering on some of West Toronto's most expensive residential pockets like Babby Point and High Park North, the Junction has its own unique and storied history. It's truly a tale of two cities. People used to primarily come to the Junction to work in heavy industry, and now people come here to enjoy great entertainment and outdoor spaces. If you want to make friends with your neighbors and memories with your family, the Junction is the place to craft an authentic city lifestyle. Throughout Toronto's history, the Junction has always been different. Like Riverdale and Parkdale, the Junction used to be an independent city. And you can sense this independence. Independence of thinking, culture, and design, carried through the neighborhood even today. It was annexed in 1909, and there was a prohibition on alcohol lasting for nearly 90 years and ending around the year 2000. The Junction's name comes from this being where rail lines meet. It's symbolic to how the Junction has shaped contrarian and forward thinking in Toronto in the past century. Craft Residences speaks to that history of rebellion. While other developments are delaying construction or cutting costs, Gairloch is moving forward with a confident, modern design. Craft Residences is one of these artistic expressions that will inspire the rest of the city to live artfully. And I know that sounds cheesy, but genuinely, this is one of those buildings that when you drive by on Dundas, you'll look over and say, what a beautiful building. One of the biggest concerns for condo buyers in Toronto is build quality, and if it isn't one of your concerns, it should be. This isn't fast fashion. Gairloch is a brand that the city trusts for many good reasons. Let's talk about Gairloch's track record. If you sampled 100 random realtors in Toronto about their favorite condo building, 383 Sororan is going to show up on that list at least 50 times. Most developers are heading to the high-rise, high-density sort of cookie-cutter stuff because that's where the margin is, that's where the profit is, and that's how you can sell a building in a weekend to a bunch of investors. But Bill continues to focus on these types of buildings. He builds the type of building that he himself would live in, despite the fact that they're not the most profitable type of development to be focused on. I admire that kind of focus on architecture and living rather than just a pure profit motive. Junction Point's one of my personal favorite pre-construction launches in the last 5 years or so. They did this brick screen fronting on Dundas, which has never before been done in Toronto, and is incredible the way that light plays on it and into the units behind it. It's just such a unique thing that I hope we continue to see more people stepping outside of the architectural box, so to speak, and doing that type of product. The term luxury gets thrown around a lot with Toronto condo development. But what does luxury actually mean? We can't just be a city that cuts corners. Gairloch is showing that it's important to have something to aspire to. It all starts with where you'll be living. Craft is an 8-story boutique building with 86 luxury residences. And many of these floor plans are one-of-ones. The facade of the building, for example, is a recycled stone from Amsterdam that has a stunning olive hue in the sunlight. From the outside, this building isn't only going to stand out in this neighborhood, but across the city. Gairloch has prioritized outdoor living with a layered terrace design, giving panoramic views to every balcony and patio space in the building. This means more sunlight exposure and a truly open field of view to the night sky. Given the building is surrounded by mostly low-rise residential, you have truly nothing obstructing your views. With over 5,000 units coming to market, this area of Toronto isn't only seeing private investment, it's also seeing a lot of public infrastructure and development. For example, the Toronto West Railpath Extension, which was approved by the city and will take you all the way down to Liberty Village. So this building isn't really built for the investor, it's built for the end user. And what that means is obviously there's going to be less turnover in the building and your neighbors are here to stay. It's also incredibly rare in Toronto for a building to be built with the end user in mind rather than the investor. It's impossible to overlook the artistry of Craft Residences and the Junction. Great cities are born through great buildings. Craft your own urban story at Craft Residences. All right, so I wanted to add more context to why I like Craft so much. Here you've got Dundas, Runnymede here, and here you have Craft Residences. Now, if we head further down Dundas, you're gonna get to Junction Point, which you can see right here. Another beautiful building by Gairloch, again with that brick screen fronting on Dundas. Just a very architecturally unique building. And if you head further down Dundas, all the way over to the Roncy, you can see 383 Sororan here, another Gairloch building, in fact, their first building, and that building has done incredibly well. The idea here being a trilogy of 3 buildings on Dundas Street. Whether you're using Dundas to get in or out of the city, you're going to see 3 unique boutique buildings from Gairloch that are going to stand out amongst the rest of the buildings in Toronto. Here we have Craft here. One of my favorite things about this building is definitely the facade. You have the natural recycled stone that is going to appear gray, or if there's a lot of sunlight, it's going to have sort of an olive hue that you can see in this rendering here. And of course, you've got the ground floor retail as well. Now, one thing I want to talk about is in my videos, I frequently talk about boutique buildings. I talk about why I like boutique so much, and there's a number of reasons for that. Now, one primary reason I love boutique buildings is because most of the people purchasing in a boutique building are actually buying to move in. They're buying for themselves, and that can make the building great as an asset as well, because you have less turnover in the building, you have less investors, less tenants, and your neighbors are there to stay. And generally there's a better sense of community as well. And of course, things like elevators aren't a concern. But I want to bring you back for a minute to a time that probably none of us enjoyed, but the start of COVID, when lockdowns first hit. Obviously, condos in Toronto sort of had a flash crash. So what I want you to pay attention to here is the condo average selling price in Toronto here. So the first quarter of 2020. And then here, the third quarter of 2020. Now, obviously, condo prices have since recovered, but with that being said, just take a look at that drop. What Urban Nation did is they took that data and broke it down by building height. So they looked at the change in per square foot selling values in buildings from the first quarter of 2020 versus the third quarter of 2020. And what they found was really interesting. Now, intuitively, I knew this would be the case, but it's nice to see the data here to back it up. So what they found was buildings under 20 stories actually didn't correct in price. In fact, they went up, not much, but they went up a little bit. Whereas the correction in the condo market was heavily concentrated in high-rise buildings, over 40 stories, somewhat in buildings 30 to 39 stories. And again, sort of the 20 to 29 year mid-rise to approaching high-rise buildings fared okay as well. And this really just goes to show, you know, when you have a building that is 80% homeowner instead of 80% investor, from an investment standpoint, that building tends to hold up better in turbulent times. Now, if we focus on the Junction as a whole here, obviously it's a growing pocket. There's a ton of new development in the area. There's a lot of great restaurants, a lot of great bars. But with that being said, a lot of people have this notion that the Junction is far cheaper than downtown Toronto. That's just not the case, right? If you look at the average resale price for a condo in the Junction and downtown Toronto, the spread is actually very close. However, the pre-construction selling price is not very close. So you can get into the Junction for 13, 14, 1500 bucks a square foot. But in areas like Moss Park, so certainly not the best neighborhood of downtown Toronto, you're going to pay upwards of 1600 bucks a square foot. In terms of craft in particular, you're surrounded by some of the best neighborhoods in the city. Babby Point, personally my favorite West End neighborhood, 2.2 million average detached selling price. High Park, of course, 2.4 million. A cult favorite here in Toronto. One of my favorite neighborhoods as well. You have the Roncy at just over a $2 million average price point. And when you look at Gairloch's first boutique building in Roncy, 383 Sororan, you'll see that over time, this building has outperformed the market. So in 2014, they were in the $500 per square foot range. And as of last year, they were selling north of 1,200 bucks a square foot on average. So the building obviously has done really well over time. Now, I talked about this in the video previously a little bit. There is a lot of development coming to the Junction. In fact, there's a lot more than 5,000 units coming to the market. However, what you will notice with a lot of that density is it's sort of around the St. Clair Stockyards area, right? So we have Craft Residences right here on Dundas, my preferred pocket of the Junction, because obviously you're just walking distance to the Dundas Strip where there's lots of stuff to do. But when we head over to St. Clair, you'll see all of this density. And a big part of the reason for all of this high-rise density is, of course, right here. This is the Smart Track Go station that'll allow people to get downtown. And all this density is great, and it provides a lot of growth for the neighborhood. And of course, in Toronto, we need more housing. So great stuff to see. But at the end of the day, living in a high-rise building is very different from living in a boutique building. So if you're buying, a condo for your kids, or maybe you're looking to downsize in this particular pocket, for me personally, I would way rather be in a boutique. And what you'll notice is there's very few boutiques coming to this pocket of Toronto, coming to any pocket of Toronto, because they're of course less profitable to build. So this year has obviously been a turbulent time for the real estate market. In fact, 40 condo projects across the GTA are currently on hold. But Gairloch is moving forward. So they actually just completed demolition and they are ready to go on construction, because obviously at the end of the day, as interest rates increase, investors are less likely to participate in a market like pre-construction, but end users are still buying and selling homes. They're still downsizing. They're still buying condos for their kids. So it's a lot easier to sell 86 unique units in a great building than it is to sell 500 units in a very average cookie cutter building. Now, despite the rapid increase in population that Canada is currently going through, housing completions are of course not rising, because you have projects that are being put on hold as a result of the current state of the market. And we are already starting to see that reflect in the data. So if you look at the third quarter of this year, it was the lowest third quarter in over a decade for new condo starts in the GTA. And so with Gairloch moving forward with construction on this project will deliver at a time when there's less new supply coming online to the market, because developers that would have otherwise launched are choosing not to as a result of the market. Now, I don't want to spend 30 minutes going through all of the features, the fit and finish of this building and these suites here, but suffice to say, luxury, the term gets thrown around a lot in Toronto, doesn't really mean much anymore. But of course, in a Gairloch, you're going to get standard hardwood throughout, not laminate, and just a higher level of fit and finish. One thing in particular that isn't noted in the brochure that I kind of want to point out is that you're not going to see floor to ceiling windows. You actually see these punched windows, and that is great for a number of reasons. Sound insulation is one of them. Energy efficiency is another. But most importantly to me, most condos in Toronto are built with a glass curtain wall. There's a number of reasons for this. You may think it's because people love floor to ceiling windows, but it's actually because developers love floor to ceiling windows, because it is in fact the most cost effective way to build a condo building. However, as you can see, basically you have a window curtain wall held up against the concrete by brackets. Those joints expand and contract over time, particularly in climates like Canada. And so they start to fail over time, and they need massive maintenance or replacement. And so, condos that are coming up on 25, 30, 40 years old in Toronto are going to be faced with massive special assessments in order to fix those issues. So it's not really a consideration if you're buying a condo for 5 or 10 years. But if you're looking at buying something that you want to live in for an extended period of time, or maybe hand down to your kids, then you really want to be focused on the mid and low rise buildings that are doing things like punched windows for longevity. And you can see it in the architectural plans here. You can see where the windows are. So those are just some of the things I couldn't fit in the original craft video that I wanted to point out to you guys. If you want more information, the links are in the description. And that's it for this video. I will see you guys next time.